Howdy everyone, welcome back to Harp and Guitar. So for today's video, I think I wanted to kick things off with my blues history. And I think what better place to start than at the very beginning, or at least as far back as we can trace to the very beginning of where the blues started, the roots of the blues, if you will. So let's get into our time machines here and head back to the turn of the century, or should I say the turn of the last century, so right around the early 1900s. And we're going to travel south to Mississippi and the Mississippi Delta, and to some extent in and around the Louisiana area as well. Now this is sort of the setting, or the birthplace of where the blues, ultimately as we know it, began. Now, a lot of people think that the blues just kind of sprung up out of the Mississippi Delta mud somewhere around the 1900s as, you know, a fairly established musical art form. It's not really the case, actually. It took many decades through the 1870s, right through until the early 1900s, 1910s-ish, for it to fully develop into a proper structured musical form. Prior to that, it had its origins in what we're going to discuss today, and that would be field hollers and work songs. Now, what's a field holler? Well, as the name would suggest, it's hollering or calling out while you're working in the field. And this was really the sort of the jumping off point from where the blues evolved. A good example of a sort of a field holler type of scenario would be, let's say it's the late 1890s and we are in Mississippi and we're in a cotton field, and I'm working a few rows on my cotton field, and you and I know each other. We're friends, we're companions, we're co-workers, shall we say, and you're working quite a few rows down, maybe 50 to 100 yards away, and you're working your rows of your cotton. And we each have our job to do, and we're expected to do a certain amount of work by the end of the day. Now, toiling out in these open fields in Mississippi, during our cotton harvest time, during the height of summer, it's extremely hot, very backbreaking labor, working from sunup till sundown, often 6 days a week. Very humid, hot conditions, very tough for anybody to work in, even by today's standards. And really the only way that a lot of these men in these early days could sort of ease their workload was to sing, or to sing out and try to accompany themselves while they worked. I mean, people do this all the time. I mean, everybody pretty much does it even now. I know I do it when I'm doing chores around the house, or I'm out chopping firewood or something like that. I'll sing or whistle or hum to myself. It was no different then than it is now. Now, because, as I mentioned, a lot of these early sharecroppers worked in the same field, but often over great distances, they would develop these work songs while they were working to help pass the time and to help relieve their work pressures, but also to communicate with one another across large distances of these cotton fields or corn fields or pea farms or tobacco farms or wherever they happen to be working. So as a result, because they were working together but weren't side by side, they could holler out to one another in sort of a sing-song type of yelling or crying out. And eventually, over time, this developed into these what became known as field hollers or work songs. So for example, if I was working in my section of the field and I wanted to call out or sing out, and one of my compatriots was 60 or 80 yards away and he wanted to join in, if I called out loud enough in his direction, he could respond back to me, okay? And this is how the blues developed in its early times. And incidentally, a lot of researchers and historians also sort of attribute this calling out and response as sort of the main basis for the structure of the blues, where it's known as having an AAB format, where the first line is sung out, and then it's repeated, and then a third line is sung out that rhymes with the first two lines. So a good example of a field holler would be if I'm working here in my section of the field, and I call out, "Oh, sun going down, dark gonna catch me here, dark gonna catch me here." And then my buddy, 50 or 60 or 80 yards away, would holler back, "Oh, sun going down, dark gonna catch me here, dark gonna catch me here." And eventually, as I mentioned, this developed into the modern blues form, where you sing out one line, then you repeat, or there is a response repeated back to you of that one line, and then the third line, which is different, but rhymes with the first two. Now, over time, as I mentioned, these gained more of a classic structure, because it was eventually sort of married with the European blues, or the European musical structure. That way, at least it can be written down and recorded, and new songs could be written. But initially, these were all just passed down as oral tradition, and these songs sort of became known from worker to worker, sharecropper to sharecropper, and from farm to farm or plantation to plantation. A lot of these men, during these early times, were migrant workers. So they would travel and work a certain time of year at a certain farm, let's say slightly to the southeast, and they'd work in the tobacco farms. Then they would move across into Mississippi and Georgia and work in the cotton plantations. And then they would move a little bit further west, eventually find their way into Texas, and so on and so forth. And as a result of these migrations, and a lot of these sharecroppers traveling from not only city to city and county to county, from state to state, a lot of these songs got passed around all of these different areas, and over the decades eventually formed what we would now call the blues. All right, so I think that's going to do it for today, everyone. So once again, I want to thank all of you for coming by and checking things out here at Harp and Guitar. And let us know what you think. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe to the channel here. And look forward to talking to you a little bit more about blues history. Thanks, everyone. Take care and have a great day. Bye-bye.